Welcome classic rock fans to another episode of Classic Song Review, where classic tracks are excavated and explored. And today we're looking at Hotel California by the Eagles. This iconic number portrays an unflattering topography of fame, where dreams often transmogrify horribly into nightmares. We get that opening jangle of the guitar notes, which have an alluring, almost otherworldly quality. They beckon us in, of course, to Hotel California, indeed the title and the subject of the song. A song that is an allegory, according to Don Henley, for the dissolute and shallow pursuits of starstruck LA. And just as we've become enticed in by those delightful and chiming guitar notes, we get that drum beat, which sounds like a door being emphatically slammed shut. Then, of course, we're forced to be voyeurs to this nocturnal feeding frenzy. These excesses are described in a series of enigmatic symbols by a narrator whose voice is jaded and world-weary. We get this itinerary of fractured and shallow lives amid the meaningless baubles of stardom. A chilling and brilliant evocation of Hollywood's nightly witching hour, according to Rolling Stone magazine. Some commentators have argued that this song depicts the end of the hippie dream, or that counterculture idealism. I would argue, of course, that that happens way before 1976. But certainly what it does do is it sort of dismisses the idea that LA is some sort of sun-kissed utopia. Listening to this song, it's hard to reconcile the cynicism of it with a band that only a few years previously had crooned a peaceful, easy feeling. In fact, one music paper, I forget which, has said, "It's like a pleasantly stoned dream, rudely interrupted by the pressures of business and fame." I would add copious amounts of cocaine into the mix as well. If we think of the album, of course, Hotel California, it presents us with an interesting song cycle that speaks eloquently of depravity and dissent. In fact, Don Henley has gone on record saying this album is actually a concept album. And the title track swirls around like a bad trip. It's a narrative haze that speaks of everything from Satanism, allegedly, drug addiction, and descent into madness. So what are the origins for this track? Well, the working title for this song was Mexican Reggae. The music was written by Don Feld in his rented Malibu home, and the lyrics by Don Henley a bit later on. Interesting, Don Felder has said, "We were driving at night and on the horizon you could see the lights of Los Angeles from about 100 miles away. And Henley said, that would be a great idea to write a song about the concept of California." Interesting aside, of course, is that while the Eagles were recording Hotel California, Interesting aside, of course, is while the Eagles were recording Hotel California, Black Sabbath were in the adjacent studio recording their album Technical Ecstasy. Now, Sabbath, of course, were incredibly loud, and a lot of Sabbath's music started to bleed through onto the Eagles' recordings. So the Eagles had to redo a lot of stuff. Although Geezer Butler says that when Black Sabbath went into the Eagles' studio after they'd finished, they said we couldn't use the mixing desk, we had to clear all the cocaine from it before we could use it. There was about a pound of the stuff all over the place. When we think of this song, we have that image that adorns the album cover in our mind, I think. Interestingly, of course, the album was designed by John Kosh, a man who was responsible for such iconic album covers as Get Your Yah-Yahs Out by the Stones, Abbey Road by the Beatles, of course, and Who's Next by the Who. When they were scouting for a location, of course, they eventually settled on the Beverly Hills Hotel, which was on Sunset Boulevard. Now, John Kosh deliberately photographed the hotel in low light conditions with high-speed film. This, of course, gives a very grainy quality to it, which thematically links into the whole idea, because you get something that's faded and nebulous. As I've said before, the general consensus is that this song is a critique of fame and the excesses of. It's infused with images of entrapment and enslavement, and of course the dangers of an unrestrained life. Now, the idea of being trapped has very much become part of the popular vernacular. In fact, it was an image that was evoked in the recent, to describe the EU in the recent Brexit debate here in the UK. The lyrics for this track are seen as at best enigmatic, at worst vague, but that sort of fits in or feeds into the whole sort of symbolism of the number. You get classical themes that play out light and darkness, good and evil, are constantly juxtaposed with one another. We get this, it fits into the very fabric of the number. It's like some sort of hellish fable. And we get that woman standing in the doorway like Mephistopheles to beckon us in. If I may quote Don Henley, "The song deals with the traditional classical themes of conflict, darkness and light, good and evil, youth and age, the spiritual versus the secular. I guess you could say it's a song about the loss of innocence. There's no doubt in my mind that above the door should hang the sign, "All that glitters is not gold." Very much reminiscent, of course, of the entrance to the Inferno. "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here." The narrator, of course, explores these different shades of meaning. Some, of course, say that this is a hymn to Satanism. Others that we get lines that refer to drug addiction. I use the term lines advisedly here. But it's certainly a song that speaks of insincerity. It's an atmosphere that rises palpably from that dark desert highway. And of course it's a highway that's littered with the trinkets of fame. Her mind is Tiffany twisted, indeed. Glenn Fry, in an interview for the BBC, said this song reads like an episode of The Twilight Zone. And certainly the cinematic quality of it wasn't lost on Julia Phillips, who of course produced The Sting and other Hollywood blockbusters, as she wanted to turn it into a film. It was a project, of course, that never got off the ground. As well as the music being incredibly atmospheric, the lyrics are quite enigmatic and certainly worthy of scrutiny. I mean, for example, we start off with that reference to that dark desert highway and the warm smell of colitas. It's very, it's what we call atmospheric colouring. Of course, the warm smell of colitas, I mean, some have said that colitas is slang, has sort of sexual connotations, but others that it's just slang for marijuana. I think Don Felder said that the smell of colitas in the air adds a kind of a funky smell to the region. I love the atmospheric appeal or colouring evoked with this song. Of course, we get that very shadowy, threatening figure in the doorway, a doorway that could be heaven or it could be hell. The pealing of the mission bell and the lighting of the candle. This sort of rich religious symbolism evokes an atmosphere of unease. These images haunt the listener long after the final note has been struck. Interestingly, someone said the reference to the lighting of the candle is a drug reference. I'm not so sure about that though. Then we get those references, those wonderful references to the voices in the corridor and this chorus, almost like a chorus of lost souls, beckoning the narrator and by association us, of course, into this very nebulous world. Interestingly, of course, on the whole sort of satanic note, and I'm quoting from Wikipedia here, in the 1980s, the Reverend Paul Risley of the Cornerstone Church in Burlington, Wisconsin, actually alleged that Hotel California referred to a San Francisco hotel that was purchased by Anton LaVey, converted into his Church of Satan. These interpretations often get to be quite outlandish. There's even some that have suggested that the whole song is about heroin addiction and even cannibalism. I shit you not. I love the line, "Her mind is Tiffany twisted." The alliteration really works, I think, and lots of pretty, pretty boys, which has a sneering quality and speaks of insincerity. Other great lines include "Some dance to remember, some dance to forget," communicates abandonness and shallowness, intoxication, a loss of control. We get voices calling from far, far away like distant memories before we get that ultimate image of decadence, the mirrors on the ceiling and the pink champagne on ice. Before that woman reappears, that nebulous figure that acts as a guide, very much like Virgil is to Dante as they traverse the Inferno. Then we got the last verse, of course, referring to the Master's Chamber and the killing of the beast, dense with this ritualistic symbolism. Many have said, of course, that this is a metaphor for substance addiction. Interesting, of course, the adjective steely is a reference to Steely Dan. Steely Dan, of course, had alluded to the Eagles in their song, "Everything You Did." Of course, the Eagles released Hotel California on December the 8th, 1976, 2 weeks after, of course, the Sex Pistols had put out Anarchy in the UK. Of course, the Eagles, with this very mellow country rock vibe, seem to occupy a very different universe to the British punk scene. Yet both uncompromisingly portray the luminaries that surround them with a sneering contempt for fakery and bluster. Anyway, you've been watching an episode of Classic Song Review. Please click like and subscribe, check out the Facebook page. But more importantly, please do keep listening.